Welcome back, guys. Blizzard just made a pretty big announcement regarding some upcoming nerfs to the mage class, so I want to just make a video to help unpack what these nerfs are, what they're going to mean for the overall meta, and then just give you guys some decks that I think are going to be pretty powerful coming out of this change. So let's just dive right into it. So let's just talk about the nerfs themselves really quickly. There are two cards that are going to get hit. The first is Evocation, which is a 1 mana spell that fills your hand with a bunch of other spells, and then the second is Solarium Prime, which is a 7 mana 7/7 that casts 5 random spells and targets your opponent's minions when possible. So let's start with Evocation. Evocation is now moving from 1 mana to 2 mana, and that's pretty important. Mostly because the main deck that we're seeing on ladder right now is this small spell mage, which thrives off of your ability to play a whole bunch of cards that didn't start in your deck. Of course, Evocation is very useful for that. However, now this card at 2 mana becomes much less synergistic with another cornerstone card of this deck, which is Sorcerer's Apprentice, because now you can't plop down Sorcerer's Apprentice and then play Evocation for 0 mana to then have mana remaining to play more spells behind that are generated from Evocation. And that's pretty important. At the very least, it slows down the curve of the deck, and that can have a huge impact on the deck's power level. But what's also extremely important is that this card now can't be generated off of cards like Wandmaker or Cobalt Spellkin, which have been cards that have been included in a lot of versions of this small spell mage deck, and now it's going to be a little bit harder to access. So that combination of making the card harder to generate while at the same time making it slower to play is going to make this card much weaker, and I think overall makes the deck a lot weaker as well. Not to mention that even playing it on its own, when you have to play it for 2 mana, it then limits the number of spells or the combination of spells that you can then play behind it as well, so it becomes just that much less flexible. So again, I think that this is a pretty important nerf to this card, and it will definitely result in the power level of small spell mage at the very least decreasing significantly. So now let's talk about Solarium Prime. Solarium Prime is now moving from 7 mana to 9 mana, but keeping the exact same stat line. That's pretty significant for a couple of reasons. So first, and most obviously, it comes out much later, and because it comes out on turn 9 or turn 10, whenever, you are much more likely as an opponent to have the ability to respond to this card pretty directly. Whereas before, it could be an almost game-ending swing turn on turn 7 that still just leaves a 7/7 body on the board that's difficult to remove. But by turn 9 or 10 of a game, you'll have had the opportunity to either develop a minion that can hopefully directly challenge the 7/7 body, and even if that were to die to Solarium Prime's effects, with the 9 or 10 mana that you have, you should be able to hopefully use resources from hand to deal with the 7/7 body or whatever effects that it might have generated. Does Solarium Prime still have enormous high roll potential? Yes, but again, coming out a couple turns later is still pretty important. The other thing that's really important is the fact that it now takes up almost an entire turn. Before, if you played Solarium Prime at 7 mana, you still had 3 mana, assuming you played it on turn 10, to be able to execute whatever follow-up you needed to remove something from the board or make another tempo play or whatever. And again, this is pretty significant as well. So with these two cards seeing some pretty big nerfs, I think it's going to make the viability of small spell mage and really the mage class, because both of these cards are pretty important to almost every mage deck. I think it's going to make the mage class just a little bit weaker, and certainly makes small spell mage much less part of ladder. So now the question is, what impact is this going to have on the overall meta? What classes are going to see a boost from these changes? And I think that there are a couple of decks that are going to see an increase in power level because of these changes, and so let's dive into those a little bit. So the first and most obvious class that's going to see a direct increase in play resulting from these nerfs is Paladin. Small spell mage has been the worst enemy of Broom Paladin and Pure Paladin for the past couple of months. So now with these nerfs and less people probably playing this deck, Paladin's going to have an absolute field day on ladder. If you look at Hearthstone replay, Broom Paladin had a 39% win rate against small spell mage. So again, this leaving ladder is extremely significant. But even if you were to look at Pure Paladin, which I actually think is the weaker of the two decks overall, it had a better win rate against small spell mage, but the higher you moved up on ladder, the worse that win rate got, to the point where once you hit legend, it actually had a very similar win rate at about 40%. So again, small spell mage leaving ladder or being significantly weaker on ladder, if it is still played, is going to be a very important boost to the Paladin class, and I think both Broom Paladin and Pure Paladin are going to be extremely big winners resulting from these nerfs. But the second deck that I want to talk about is actually Secret Rogue. Now, Mage wasn't actually that bad of a matchup for Secret Rogue. On Hearthstone Replay, you could see it was around 60%, but just from personal experience, I play a ton of Rogue, and I think in the high legend area, it was probably closer to around like 52%, where we had a little bit of an edge, but not as dramatic as Hearthstone Replay portrays here. However, the reason why this is going to see such a huge increase in play after these nerfs is because of what we just talked about, Paladin. If more people are playing Paladin on ladder, that's a huge win for Rogue players. Paladin is easily the best matchup for Secret Rogue, and I think that the more Paladin sees play, the stronger Rogue is going to get. And this is already a pretty strong deck. So if you want to be proactive and kind of get ahead of the immediate response to Mage being nerfed, which is going to be people playing more Paladin, go ahead and dive right in with Secret Rogue. I think it's going to be very, very helpful in dispatching all of the Paladin that you're going to see on ladder following the nerfs. So the last deck that I want to talk about is a little bit of a hot take, but I think it's going to prove correct in a couple of weeks from now, and that's that Enrage Warrior is going to come back in a pretty big way. So hear me out. Gabby recently reclaimed the #1 spot with this deck on ladder, so it has a little bit of momentum going for it already. But now if Mage sees less play on ladder or no play at all, then that's another really bad matchup removed from the pool for Enrage Warrior. Because there's no infinite freezes or devolving missiles to make all of your buffs completely insignificant, Enrage Warrior now has a pretty good matchup against almost everything that we'll see on ladder, assuming no other really viable Mage deck bubbles to the surface. And even if Mage does come back in like its Highlander variant, if you remember from the last meta or maybe a couple metas ago, Enrage Warrior still performed decently well against Highlander Mage. So again, I think Enrage Warrior is going to be coming back in a big way, especially after these nerfs, and Mage won't be around to stop it. So this is another deck that you can give a try if you're looking to take advantage of the new meta that's going to be arising after the Mage nerfs come through. So guys, those are the 3 decks that I think are going to be extremely powerful coming out of these nerfs, and I hope that was helpful to you guys. And if it was, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so that way you can come back and see all the content that I'll be creating just for you guys. And as a brief side note, if the Secret Rogue section in particular interested you, I did write a guide about this deck about a week ago, so I'll provide the link to that in the description below. Other than that guys, have a great day. I'll see you guys soon.